The very sky above Vandria was a wound torn open, crimson clouds like shredded flesh churning across the heavens, casting a feverish glow over the skeletal remains of the world below. What had once been a spire-studded monument to imperial supremacy was now only jagged teeth of broken towers and shattered temple facades biting a sky choked with smoke. The wind didn't whistle, it howled, a mournful dirge funneled through desolate avenues, carrying on its back the sickening stench of roasting meat that could only be human, the raw, mocking laughter of demons, and the far more chilling sound beneath it, the thin, despairing wails of the damned, trapped within the very stones. Foulness pervaded the air, a tangible, oily miasma of corruption that clung to the lungs and sank into the scorched earth like poison seeping through soil. Demons, nightmares allowed flesh, patrolled this charnel ground. Bloodletters, brass armor gleaming unnaturally in the murk, stank of fresh gore as they surged through rubble-strewn plazas. Bloated plague-bearers, wounds weeping viscous streams of pus and decay, shuffled tirelessly, while above, twisted horrors with the faces of cruel jesters and claws like rusted hooks screeched through the smoke, their manic giggling tearing at the sanity of any who heard. Vandria burned and bled, teetering on the precipice of total annihilation, a decades-long symbol of imperial defiance now reduced to mere grist for the chaos mill, its once fertile soil, a gluey morass of mud and coagulating blood. Tanks lay burned out, crushed beneath fallen masonry, broken guns pointed uselessly at an uncaring sky, and the scattered remnants of armies, both men and machines, had been consumed, ripped apart in ravenous waves of torment-driven entities spilling from the warp's gaping tear. Yet deeper still, beneath the immediate slaughter, something ancient and infinitely more terrible stirred, a presence heavy with malice, a demon prince, patient and predatory, waiting for the death throes of resistance to cease before claiming this scarred prize for eternity. Amidst the cacophony of agony and infernal triumph, a zone of utter silence descended, colder and denser than the surrounding chaos, a heavy, oppressive shroud smothering a specific expanse of the battlefield. It wasn't the absence of sound, but its utter negation. From the boiling, smoke-clogged sky, unseen by broken mortal eyes blinded by terror or flickering psychic wards shielding their approach, the Grey Knights emerged. Their strike cruiser was a predator's shadow, sleek and angular, muffled engines mastered by technologies lost to common knowledge, slicing through the corrupted atmosphere like a dagger sliding into darkness, casting no reflection, whispering no arrival scream. None witnessed their descent, such was their way, their eternal burden. These ghosts were the Emperor's most secret bastion, the final silent bulwark against the howling madness of the immateriate. In perfect, unnerving unison, they disembarked, massive figures encased in silvered power armor that caught the infernal light with a faint, icy gleam, seeming to drink in the surrounding shadows. Their helmets, stylized like the grim visages of legendary heroes, rendered into cold metal, concealed faces etched not by time, but by millennia of unrecorded battle fought against the soul-consuming void. Each moved with calibrated precision, each step a measured action from an eternal drill, imposing yet chillingly spectral. One hand held the humming, psychic blade of the Nemesis force weapon, vibrating with contained power. The other clasped the unforgiving bulk of a storm bolter, primed to unleash its sanctified purgation. Purity seals, parchment inscribed with potent librarium script, fluttered like trapped butterflies on their armored plates. The sight of them was the manifested wrath of the God Emperor upon a nightmare realm, and there was no sight to witness it. Not the ragged, cowering mortals huddled in the newly made tombs of their city, not the deranged survivors who saw only the encroaching horror and awaited oblivion. The Grey Knights fought utterly unseen, their arrival marked only by shifts in the unseen currents of the warp. They sought no glory, demanded no hymns of praise, craved no recognition from those they shielded. Their war was waged purely for the survival of the human soul against ultimate defilement. At their forefront strode Justicar Fieros. His armor, twin in design yet seared by the unique signatures of greater battles, bore intricate warding sigils pulsating with faint light, and deeper scars etched into the ceramite itself, stories told in the brutal language of conflict fought within the screaming heart of the immateriate battlefield he now surveyed. His thoughts, disciplined in psychic iron, were unassailable, his will an adamantium pillar beneath the crushing weight of duty that bent even Astarte's shoulders. The mission pulsed within him. Total eradication of the demonic incursion before Vandra V could be fully digested into the belly of unreality. A demon prince had been sighted, felt its existence here a pulsing, suppurating wound tearing at the fabric of reality itself. Failure was unthinkable. More than just the loss of this rock was at stake. It would be a cancerous victory for the primordial annihilator, a deliberate hammer blow shattering the already strained integrity of the Imperium's shield. Behind the polarized glint of his visor, Fieros dissected the battlefield's chaos. Bloodletters skulking through labyrinthine alleys carved from ruins, hunting the last hiding prey, plague-bearers leaving trails of slime and decay as they shambled mindlessly, flesh hounds baying lost beneath the aerial shrieks of demonic flyers. Yet his awareness pierced deeper, probing the unstable currents of the warp. "We purge in his name," Fieros's voice issued over the squadlink vox, devoid of inflection, colder than Titan's void. "Advance." The Grey Knights moved as one synchronous engine of destruction, utterly soundless, relentless as tectonic pressure. Their armored boots crushed shattered ferrocrete and splintered bone but released no report. The air itself thickened and silenced around them by the potent psychic nullshroud generated by their librarian brother. Their approach was invisible, intangible, a tidal wave of sanctioned oblivion crashing upon a beach teeming with nightmarish life utterly oblivious to their approach. No alarm cry pierced the air ahead of them. With a single sharp gesture, a hunter's command as old as the chapter itself, Fieros unleashed extinction. Bolts of holy fire erupted, not as a rabble's discharge, but as precise volleys of radiant vengeance. The sacred ordnance detonated within the corrupted flesh of the demons, with bursts of incandescent light. Shapes that defied reason screamed as molecular structures, never meant to withstand such distilled purity, were ripped apart. Grotesque forms dissolved into sprays of ichor and flickering banished sparks as each detonation chanted the Emperor's ultimate deliverance. Bloodletters spun like ignited chaff, their brass armor no protection against the immolating sanctity shredding their very essence. This symphonic destruction, this cleansing fury poured from their bolters, was but a prelude. The true soul of the Grey Knights lay in the psychic resonance vibrating through their blades and armor. As the surviving, suddenly aware demons turned, shrieking with outrage, drawing weapons sheathed in toxic flame or trailing psychic decay, Fieros and his brothers transformed into quicksilver phantoms of retribution, closing with terrifying silence. Their force weapons hummed, keening dissonantly as psychic might attuned itself to the wielder's focused hatred. Fieros swept his halberd in a wide, terrible arc, the energized blade shearing clean through the bulge of a plaguebearer's rotting skull. The Nemesis force weapon flared with coruscating light as it consumed the vile demonic spirit, sucking it shrieking back into the warp from which it crawled. Around him, his brothers fought with grim, terrifying proficiency. Every cut of a blade was anatomically precise. Every thrust of a gauntleted fist crackled with lethal psychic discharge, strikes conceived solely for the utter banishment of the unholy. Barriers of pure force sprung into existence, crackling against infernal claws seeking purchase on sacred plate, deflecting roiling blasts of encapsulating filth. Beneath their breath, hidden within sealed helmets, whispered litanies of purification lashed out like psychic scourges, searing demonic entities without physical touch. With every demon obliterated, with its vile presence extinguished, a small, defiant star of the Emperor's sacred light seemed to pulse brighter in the suffocating darkness. Yet, even as the remnants of the lesser host smoldered into reeking smoke and scattered ectoplasm, a cold, creeping dread sank deeper into Fieros's consciousness. The battlefield around him seemed to pulse with a deeper, hungrier darkness. He felt it now with visceral certainty, a crushing psychic pressure in the warp, vast and ancient, drawing nearer with each fallen lesser entity, feeding on their demise. The demon prince was not biding its time, it was savoring the overture. Then, as though Fieros's unspoken recognition were a lure, the ravaged earth itself convulsed. Rubble cascaded from the gaping maw that had once been a grand cathedral's entrance. From the acrid smoke and devastation, clad in writhing shadows and flames that hissed against the thickening miasma, the demon prince emerged. Its true form, a blasphemous mockery of anything born of mortal flesh, rippled with unstable power drawn direct from the Imperium's heart. It towered massively over even the transhuman knights, its very presence a suffocating weight threatening to crush reason loose. Fieros fixed his gaze upon the monstrous entity, feeling its raw attention settle upon him with the immense gravity of a collapsing star, a psychic pressure threatening to buckle ceramite and shatter bone, twisting his innermost being with its lingering, suffocating touch. His grip tightened on the haft of his halberd. He did not flinch. He was Grey Knight. He was the Emperor's will. "Brothers," Fieros declared, his voice calm bedrock amidst the psychic storm the prince radiated, cutting through the rising cacophony of lesser demons rallying to their master's side. The true battle begins, for him on Terra. With storm bolters roaring their metallic hymns and force blades, igniting with blinding, righteous light, prayers of condemnation etched in psychic fire upon their souls, the Grey Knights of the Purifier Squad charged as one into the heart of the demonic storm, a blade of pure faith thrust towards the black heart of corruption itself. The psychic feedback scream of clashing powers, the roar of the demonic prince, the crackle of sanctified flames all seemed to momentarily distort and echo strangely within Fieros's mind as he faced unspeakable ancient hate. Another fire burned within his soul, older than the conflict before him, deeper than the combat fury thrumming through his enhanced frame. It wasn't the raw fire spurring bolter shells from chambers, nor the cold fire of unsheathed force blades. It wasn't even the incendiary rage that could consume lesser minds facing such cosmic corruption. This was Ember's weight from the deep past, a knowledge weight carried in every atom of a Grey Knight's existence, seeded from the very dawn of their creation, smoldering even as Feroz leveled his halberd at the reality-rending monstrosity before him. For an immeasurable splinter of time, the shattered landscape of Vandria blurred, bleeding away into chaotic streams of distorted memory carried on the unseen, turbulent tides of the warp itself. Feroz's consciousness snagged, dragged back eons to the cataclysm that had birthed them all to time before his awakening in Geneforged ceramic, to the time before the chapter existed except as desperate hope inscribed on the Emperor's shattered will, to Earth's darkest, reeling moments just after the Horus Heresy had torn humanity asunder. The very foundations of civilization cracked under the strain then. The galaxy was a funeral pyre, its light extinguished by betrayal beyond comprehension. Horus Lupercal, Warmaster, beloved son, the blasphemous truth echoed still corrupted, seduced utterly by the ruinous powers dwelling beyond sanity, had turned his immense legions against the Imperator himself. Worlds burned, fleets turned their guns inward, titans strode against their creators, and Primarch had slain Primarch. Though Horus had fallen, a charred husk struck down by the Emperor's hand, though the traitor legions had been broken and scattered, the taste left in the Alliance's collective consciousness was ash. Victory, it was a hollow, deafening emptiness. The Emperor, beloved sovereign, architect of mankind's order, lay shattered upon the golden throne, his body a ruined conduit, his spirit locked in a state of perpetual, searing torment. Sustained only through the agonizing ritual sacrificed daily, the souls of 1,000 psychers fed like dry tinder into the throne's arcane furnace, merely to maintain a flicker of his light, holding back the crushing tide of the warp threatening to drown Terra itself. Shadows, thick with fear and whispered temptations from the Imperium, gathered thick around a crippled empire. Hope was a dwindling spark. It was from the depths of this choking despair, when darkness threatened to extinguish all remaining embers of mankind's fragile light, that the Grey Knights emerged from secrecy's womb. Deep within a concealed sanctum carved into the bowels of Titan, far from the blind scrutiny of Inquisition lords or the shattered remnants of the Council of Terra, a secret court gathered. Malcador the Sigillite, the Emperor's ancient confidant, his unwavering shadow and regent left to manage the impossible salvage operation of an empire founded upon a ruin, stood shrouded before them, his ancient, lined face a map traced by millennia of unbearable burdens. Before him stood a gathering unlike any other known to Imperial annals, warriors of impeccable loyalty, their souls unmarked even after witnessing impossible horrors, scholars with minds capable of piercing the shrouded warp, psychers whose power burned brighter than suns yet were utterly disciplined. Some were the last loyalist remnants plucked from treacherous-stained legions, veterans who had stared into the abyss of brother betrayal and held their oaths. Others culled from the shattered survivors of the Emperor's own shattered legions or the hallowed ranks of the Adeptus Custodes, the finest warriors humanity had ever bred. Yet Malcador's gaze held no comfort, only necessity sharp as psychic blades. He spoke then, his voice barely a tremor in the vast, dim vault, yet resonating within the very core of each listener's soul, carrying impossible psychic weight. "The Master," Malcador uttered, tracing ancient, glowing symbols of binding warding into the charged air before him, symbols dripping power that hummed with faint echoes of a familiar signature, his signature, utterly broken beneath rotunda calm as silent devastation on Terra above. He foresaw this passage, even in Foresight's dying light at Ullener. It is a journey deeper into shadow. Even now, with victory invoked above Lupercal's husk, the suns too stained beyond ascension, or dead, chaos, this power we name the primordial sea, it is not defeated. It cannot be killed as men understand death. Horus is carrion, yet his legacy, the insidious infection seated deep, endures. It festers, it adapts, it hungers still. It servants its demons on ships for violating the material realm. Their assaults will grow bolder, more terrible. The unseen warfare will intensify until reality itself bleeds raw. Malcador paused, his ancient eyes, sharp as poisoned needles capturing shadow, scanned the silent assembly of warriors. The galaxy is wounded, perhaps unto extend beyond our capacity. Yet it demands not merely soldiers, decorators to set matchstick anxieties, abide dust stains on velvet we name regime. It demands shields, shields forged of imperishable purity, soldiers beyond the touch of doubt. Warriors possessing the strength to stand shielded within the storm that would reduce titans to melt. Guardians ordained solely to hunt the insubstantial reapers born in the warp's utter blackness. He turned, his movements impossibly heavy. But these gathered beings here, remarkable though your souls indeed shine, are facets destined for other glory battles. You will become more. He spoke the final word with chilling force. More than mortal Astartes, more than men. His gaze impaled each of them. You must be the facet beyond compromise, above corruption unthinkable. He gestured fractionally towards nothing visible within the sanctum gloom. It felt weighted with memory turned suddenly terrible. The greatest Primarchs with his own crafted genocide coursing magnificently within temptations gnawing even through adamantium resolve. Fell. They broke. You must be immune. Purity must be etched with impossible fire, a fortress forged against any touch of that warp hunger, defiantly pure. And so began the crucible. Within Titan's deepest, shielded heart, under Malcador's unblinking eye, within shielded purity towers reinforced layer upon layer by telekine wards projected unyielding, as to ultimately contain what gestated within, the Grey Knights were forged physically and psychically. Genocide, the Emperor's own supreme legacy, gifted directly, refined beyond Primarch calibration, melded through science savagely advanced beyond heresy concepts horror, raised upon secrets gathered from pharaonic vaults and forbidden xenology studies concerning resiliencies none should have endured was implanted. Bodies were remolded into vessels nothing mortal could conceive. Yet bone and nerve enhancement endured was the lesser ordeal. True forging happened within the soul. Malcador watched glacial furnaces burn for years, shaping them. Every candidate, supremely mentally resilient, supremely physically perfected beforehand, endured unimaginable trials tearing open psychic core. They were hurled defenseless into wraith-haunted warp vortices, forced to confront discrepancies, swirling monstrous demon assailants conjured for torment. They were imprisoned in isolation chambers echoing tedium, broken only by unbearable temptation, perfect illusions offering pleasures promising satiation, power offering godhood, whispered promises revealing paths back to the family's worlds burned, sacrificed unknowingly for their recruitment. These were lies, illusions crafted by disturbance experts trained for millennia. Their minds were flayed open, thoughts sifted for the faintest, most treacherously motley ambition born free of duty. The soul was torn piecemeal in psychically resurrected trauma. Madness itself clawed at sanity's foundations relentlessly. Many broke, minds fractured beyond data slate preservation, saving only verdict, failure scrap, their bodies terminated within prisons swift beyond consciousness closing. Those who endured, they were broken utterly in order to be reforged anew. They emerged tempered, unwarpable adamant. Their very cellular structure impossibly remained irrevocably altered beyond genetic catalog comprehension. Malcador himself, merging exhausted fragments of his dragon-scale titan, mined with stored emperor faltering pattern, inscribed every surviving candidate's mindsoul surface with incomprehensible, invisible sigils of binding warding protective inscriptions, burning with pure psychic power, siphoned from the flickering lifeline feeding golden throne upon Terra itself. These sigils rendered their bearers anathema to corruption's taste itself. No demon, however ancient, could breach them. No warp-jibber promise could find the slightest fertile thoughtseed to nurture. This purity carried unbearable cost. Separation near impossible. Cut off. Knowledge restriction became armor sealing them utterly. They would battle forever unseen, unsung, unremembered even by hostages, lips saved beneath merciblets. Their existences concealed, histories systematically scrubbed. Glory existed not for them, only the cold definition of victory measured in demons banished, worlds salvaged, humanity unknowingly preserved until reality fray. They were greatest triumph, achieving only oblivion's condition. Victory purchased solely by souls carrying eternal silence internally on shoulders superhuman. Always. From that fathomless well of sacrifice, etched into his very neural framework and soul sigils, Fearos's consciousness snapped with brutal force back to the burning hellscape of Vandria V, the psychic shockwave rolling off the demon prince, a tangible pressure against his warded aura. The weight of the past, the incalculable burden wired into the soul of every gray-cloaked brother standing here, the immense isolated hole in the galaxy where their homeland lay hidden, the silent screaming cost paid for his own immunity settled upon him with crushing familiarity even as he braced for the prince's strike. It shaped his resolve, tempered the perfect edges of his hatred. Before him, the monstrous demon prince threw back its head of writhing horns and shadow stuff. Its roar physically shook the shattered battlefield, a sound not born of lungs but ripped directly from the abyss of unreality, a deafening tapestry woven from scorn, soul-shattering rage, and a grotesque parody of mocking triumph that vibrated through corroded armor plates miles away. The voice, when it slithered through the psychic assault raining upon Fearos's shields moments later, contained condescension thick as the polluted air. I perceived thee, mere flesh sculpture tangled within cold metals, it hissed, each syllable coated with the gleeful malice of carving glimpse eternal torment. I perceived the tinny echo of divinity-wrapped proto-brood vessel you mistakenly call Soulscar. Its vast shadow form rippled, flames licking hungrily towards the small cluster of silver reflecting infernal light. Whilst world blood swells ways, whilst dread angels scream upon here prior accruing, hereof behold. Zandles extinguishings. It paused, a psychic sneer physically twisting air molecules near Fieros. Hail Torchbearer extinguished most minutely potent, witness above, godhood consummated. The voice of the demon prince slithered across the shattered landscape, a venomous whisper somehow sharper than the crashing symphony of bolters and the earth-shaking footfalls of its lesser kin. Its eyes, twin furnaces fueled by the very nightmares of the damned, bored into Justicar Fieros, your soul. It hissed, the sound resonating in the marrow of his bones, a chilling counterpoint to the inferno raging beneath the cloven clouds. You wear your emperor's sigil-like chains, bound to his dying light, but in the end even you will break. Fieros felt the familiar resonance thrumming up the haft of his nemesis force staff, the psychically charged energies vibrating against his gauntleted palm, a living serpent coiled and eager. His mind remained a still, frozen pond under ancient ice clear, depthless, unyielding. The creature's words were pestilence on this wind, meant only to corrode. No tremor of fear stirred within the adamantium fortress of his will. He was Grey Knight, tempered in the screaming heart of the Imperium, quenched by the Emperor's indomitable purpose. He could not bend, he would not break, yet the prince pressed on, sensing the silent bulwark like a tangible thing it longed to shatter. They all break, mortal, it spat, contempt dripping like acid. Even your precious emperor has fallen to darkness. His body rots upon that throne, and you, his faithful dogs, are nothing but the remnants of his folly. This time Fieros felt it. Not anger at the blatant lie such blasphemies were dust before the emperor's truth, but a coiled serpent of rage stirring deep within his gut. The core of the poison held a sliver of bitter reality he fought constantly to deny. The master of mankind did reside silent upon the golden throne, his impossible life sustained by the tormented whispers of countless psychers, his agony the keystone holding back utter ruin. The Imperium built in his image cracked and bled on 1,000 fronts, gnawed at by war, heresy, and the insidious crawl of corruption from within. But that was why the Grey Knight stood sentinel. Doubt was a weakness to be excised. Questioning was a luxury they could ill afford. They existed for the purging fire, for the utter annihilation of the archenemy. That was their singular creed. Fieros snapped his staff forward, the crystalline blade erupting with coruscating arcs of psychic power, splitting the miasmic air. His command, calm as glacial depths, echoed across the secure voxlink, pulsed directly into the awareness of his battle brothers. Form up, we strike, now. Resounding through the graveyard of Vanra's cities, the prince reared. Nightmare wings unfurled, vast obscene tapestries of tattered darkness promising to eclipse the bleeding wound above that served as a sky. Reality groaned and stretched thin around its burgeoning form, the ground fracturing beneath clawed feet like brittle glass as raw, seething warp stuff vomited forth, staining the material realm with its blasphemous colors. The earth trembled in abject terror. The warped monstrosity loosed a bellow that could shatter mountains and charged, a tidal wave of distilled malice given flesh. Fieros was already in motion, a silver streak of vengeance incarnate. His brothers flowed around and after him, an extension of his own implacable will, psychic hoods blazing with azure fire, their nemesis weapons ignited cleansing wrath given physical form against the encroaching dark. They advanced without flinching, without hesitation, a wall of adamantium and holy fire against which the howling tides of chaos would dash themselves to oblivion. In eerie silence, deeper than the void, they moved as one. Shadows striking down shadows, forever the final redoubt. The meeting of the Grey Knights, Line, and the Demon Prince erupted with world-ending force. Forked lightning speared the wounded heavens as the concentrated psychic might of the Emperor's finest collided headlong with the conjured fury of the warp. Fieros's force staff slammed against the prince's colossal, blasphemy-forged blade with a shriek of energy that reverberated through the marrow of the bedrock, sending seismic aftershocks ripping through crumbling towers all around. His brothers struck with terrifying synchronicity, precision volleys of sanctified bolter rounds spat from storm bolters, detonating against the demon's hide in flares of argent detonations. Forced swords and halberds wielded with sublime artistry carved glowing runes of banishment into corrupted flesh that steamed and screamed. The prince roared its agony and rage, swinging massive claws that could bisect a tank wing, rending with fangs dripping venom that dissolved plasteel, its colossal tail a weapon like a siege engine. Yet the Grey Knights danced through the storm, utterly relentless, utterly impervious. Their will was diamond, layered through with silver sigils of unwavering faith. In the periphery churning forth like maggots from a fresh corpse, the lesser demonic horde surged, a tide of claws and teeth eager to devour the knights and drown them under the weight of chaos. The squad's librarian, standing firm amidst the hurricane of battle, raised his force staff high, intoning syllables of power that resonated not through air, but through the fabric of reality itself. The chant felt like tectonic plates grinding against the soul. A shimmering barrier, constructed from pure psychic discipline and ancient rites, solidified in the air an invisible wall of ethereal adamantium snapping into place, severing the prince from its gibbering reinforcements. For this moment, in this storm-racked arena of fallen glory, it would be champion against champions, the emissary of chaos against the Emperor's silent executioners. Feroz flowed through the prince's devastating assaults, his movements an economy of destruction honed over centuries of unceasing warfare. His force staff was a blazing arc of light in his hands, each parry instinctual, each riposte devastating, searing chunks of corrupted matter from the prince's massive torso. His consciousness, cool and profoundly focused, processed the battle with icy precision, calculating trajectories, anticipating the demon's morphing strikes, channeling the Emperor's light into every blow. He felt the immense, corrosive pressure of the prince's sheer demonic presence battering against his psychic wards, gravitational tides of fear, despair, and soul-screaming rage. But the wards etched deep into his sigil-inscribed warplate, and reforged soul flared bright, an impenetrable shield against the foulness. The prince, gargantuan embodiment of impossible malevolence, was steadily being pushed back. Its bellows shook the sky, thick with frustration and the unmistakable tang of desperation. It lashed out wildly, tearing great chunks of earth skyward, its blows becoming erratic. But the armored bulwark of the Grey Knights could not be budged. They had ventured into the tempestuous heart of the eye itself and emerged without taint, walking through infernos that would have vaporized starships. Knights eternal. Yet even as they pressed their coordinated assault, even as they carved victory from the rotting body of the prince, Feroz sensed a presence immense beyond comprehension, a purpose lurking at the very edge of his perception. A deeper, hungrier darkness observing this petty struggle for its own inscrutable ends, coiled beneath the surface of this reality like a serpent beneath the sand. The storm of flesh and psychic fury raged around Justicar Feroz. The constant hum of his force staff was a counterpoint melody to the shrieking winds and the thunderous detonations of battle. The skies wept corrupted rain that sizzled against their sacred ceramic. Still, the Grey Knights were an immovable mountain range forged not of rock, but of faith and implacable duty. Their nemesis weapons blazed with the incandescent fury of the Astronomican's concentrated might, slicing through the shifting, unnatural substance of the demon prince as easily as sunlight burns through. Yet amid the cacophony and the fierce immediacy of survival and slaughter, Feroz's mind held vast cold spaces untouched by the frenzy. The dance of death, the clash against the impossible, was his existence, ingrained as breathing. But he was more than just a weapon directed. In the silent caverns beneath conscious thought, shielded by layers of psychic fortification and remorseless training, other concepts resided: the nature of secrecy, the weight of omission, the necessary alliance. He brushed thought against the shadowy compact that bound his chapter inexorably to the Ordo Malleus. The Grey Knights were not mere soldiers fighting overt wars on battlefronts charted on stellar maps. They were stalkers, unseen reapers. They moved through the darkest corners of a crumbling Imperium, hunting manifestations of chaos too virulent, too existentially dangerous to leave any whisper of their existence. Obliteration wasn't sufficient, forgetting was paramount. This was their ancient creed, carved in the Book of Heroes, sealed beneath Titan's fortress monastery. They fought the enemies that could never be acknowledged. There were no banners emblazoned with their sigil unfurled in triumph upon liberated plains, no cheers from grateful millions echoing down ecumenical avenues, celebrating their staggering sacrifices. Their names would never appear on monuments, their victories recounted in no sanctioned imperial anthologies. The billions they saved, countless trillions whose sanity and souls they shielded from predation, would live and die never knowing the silver-armored angels who stood between them and eternal night. And that was precisely how it must be, because the mere knowledge of the Grey Knights' existence, the confirmation of the unspeakable horrors they battled daily, was a psychic contagion potentially as devastating as the demonic incursions themselves. Mortal minds, fragile candles in the cosmic storm, could unravel under the weight of such impossible truths. Soon after the chapter's clandestine founding, a unique arrangement sealed in the Emperors gave deployment oversight to the single imperial organization capable of mirroring their profound secrecy, the Ordo Malleus. The holy orders of the Emperor's Inquisition were axes forged for different ends. The Ordo Hereticus hunted the corruption within, the mutant, the heretic, the burgeoning witch enemies tangled deep in mortal society. But the Ordo Malleus, their prey were the entities outside, the inhabitants of the howling abyss beyond reality's veil that ceaselessly sought to claw their way in, to drown the galaxy in madness and demonic flesh. Agents of the warp, hunters beyond the gates. Feroz had warred alongside these black-robed judges countless times across decades and sectors. Yet it was never a bond of equals. The Inquisitors of the Malleus, lords of terrible secrets, wielded terrifying power. Their authority eclipsed planetary governors, systems commanders, even space marine chapter masters in matters pertaining to the archenemy. The mere utterance of an inquisitorial mandate could bring down hive cities, sterilize worlds in the purifying fires of exterminatus, or condemn billions to servitude or silent oblivion. They were institutions unto themselves, wielding psychers, armies, fleets of cabal draped in fear. And yet, even they regarded the Grey Knights with a potent mixture of fierce reliance and deep-seated instinctive dread. For as potent as an Inquisitor Lord might be with their retinues and their ribbons of terror-derived authority, they remained human, fragile, mortal flesh anchoring a soul vulnerable to the predations they faced. The Grey Knights were more. Feroz remembered the intimidating aura of Inquisitor Tithra, Lord Obsidian, whom he'd served alongside during the Farch Delta cleansing. He remembered standing on the rain-lashed Ferrocrete corpse of a hive spire months ago, the stench of charred ceramite and dissolved biomatter heavy, the psychic echo of banished screams still vibrating in the air. Tithra had approached him, 50 retainers falling back at an unseen signal, his face hidden in the shadow of his executioner hood, but his power pressing like physical pressure. Within his cloud of aura, lesser minds would have bent or shattered on instinct. Tithra was a being capable of shattering planetary governance with a glance aboard a starship light years away. He could command a death sentence upon a world's populace without a tremor. Yet even he, this architect of massive executions, this embodiment of imperial dread, had chosen his words with a precision approaching respect. No, mastery wasn't quite fear. Awe, wary acknowledgement of something alien and immutable. Justicar, Tithra's voice had been a rasp, sharp as monomolecular wire drawn through bone, yet Feroz had sensed that flicker and ember of something held fast in the iron grip of discipline behind those sharp, assessing eyes. Do you understand why your chapter cannot be known? Why Titansword must remain a whisper in the deepest layers of forbidden archives? His gaze swept across the smoldering ruinscape, the devastated human hive. The masses, the herds, must never see you. They cannot be permitted to ever truly know that these things exist, that the foul shapes haunting the darkest corners of their dreams crawl from a realm beyond reason, if they did. Their fragile sanity, the very foundations of the Emperor's realm, would crumble like ash on the wind. My Ordo, we scrape away the residue. We burn the records, purge the Vox transcripts, sanitize the survivors' memories, sometimes scorch away entire segments of the mindscape like cauterizing a wound. But you, Tithra's gaze met the impassive eyelences of Feroz's helmet. You are the spoken silence. You are the made tangible by blade and banishment. Feroz had offered no reply then. Words were redundant. It was the oldest truth, the core burden. They fought for the soul of humanity, but humanity must remain blissfully, eternally ignorant of its champions and the grotesque scale of the fight. They were the truth erasers, hunting in absolute silence, burning corruption only to then burn even the faintest memory of its existence. The shadowed hand of final redemption, cleansing and forgetting in one seamless, thankless motion. So now, as he wove aside from a claw strike that could level a hablock, as the prince's ichor sizzled on the sacred blade of his heard, Feroz shouldered that colossal weight once more. Valdra's prime would soon be sterilized beyond the physical. The survivors found cowering in the rubble the lucky, oblivious few not infected, sacrificed, or driven irrevocably mad, their fragile minds would be meticulously scrubbed. The Ordo Malleus was most efficient. Their tech priests wielding neural scourges and psychic pacifiers, inculcator legions enforcing sanitized proclamations. No memory of silver knights battling impossible monstrosities would survive. No recollection of the skies splitting open or the earth vomiting demonic horrors would be permitted. Those fissures in their psyche, those moments of witnessing the impossible truth, would be sealed over like scars beneath synth skin. History itself, malleable putty in the hands of the Ordos, would be rewritten. Official Comnet broadcasts would later announce it had been a vicious insurrection crushed by loyalist Astra Militarum regiments, or a sudden warplague outbreak contained by biopurge protocols, or perhaps failed void shields inviting devastating Xenos raiding parties. Another footnote in the Imperium's slow, grinding entropy. As it had been on 1,000 worlds before, so it would be again here on Valdra's prime, reason layered thick to bury the horrifyingly unreasonable. Feroz twisted his torso with power-armored precision, leverage gained through inhuman strength, driving his nemesis staff down in a crimson-trailing arc of absolute annihilation. The blazing blade, a shard of fractured starlight wrapped in the Emperor's wrath, bit deep into the demon prince's warped chest cage. A spray of sputtering, stinking essence erupted outwards. A shriek rent the air, a sound of pure violated agony that contained elements of grinding metal, tearing flesh, and a million screams truncated. Yet despite the grievous wound, reality warping around the colossal demon's malfunctioning form, it did not fall. Instead, it countered with blinding, impossible speed, a storm of claw strikes erupting towards Feroz like kinetic bombardment, blows that would immolate armor, shatter bone, and atomize any living thing beneath it. But the Grey Knights were more than steel and sinew. Around Feroz, his brothers moved with the terrifying, synchronized grace of ancient war automata. Brother Eredor lurched inwards through the maelstrom, his force sword blazing a thunderhead blue as he gashed open the prince's flank, releasing pent-up warp fumes like escaping hellgases. Justicar Aralis threw his wolf forward, a psychic concussion wave feeling like a giant's fist impacting reality itself, sending lashing tendrils of Immaterium-born claws snapping back into the suffocating void between realms. Each knight was a masterwork blade from the Emperor's armory, edge honed to perfection over millennia of conflict and psychic refinement, controlled with unerring, cold efficiency. Their minds were fortress sanctuaries armored beyond reach by indomitable faith, each thought channeled through potent wards scarred into their very genetics and apocalypse contained within sculpted flesh. Yet even as they pressed their assault, driving the blasphemy backward step by agonized step onto the fissured rock, Feroz felt the crushing, almost physical sensation of the prince's ghastly focus. The demon prince bled ichor and raw chaos, its colossal form flickering unnaturally under the barrage of holy fire, yet amidst its evident pain it was smiling. A hideous rictus of triumph etched onto the nightmare. "You are fools," its voice ground out, blending hatred and a sickening amusement. "You strike my flesh, thinking this is the end, thinking your blessed blades can carve the warp itself from existence. Imbeciles, I have gazed into the rotten heart of your Imperium. It is already ours. Your Emperor, a corpse refusing animation, sustained only by tormented souls he consumes. His domain festers from within, veins poisoned by his own feudal dogma. And you, his soulless hounds, you are relics guarding a tomb, shadows strengthening shadows. For a fleeting microsecond, smaller than the quantum oscillations of void space, a whisper of cold doubt brushed against the glacial wall of Feroz's conviction, a spider of insidious logic gnawing at the foundations of meaning. But centuries of undying mental fortitude and the furnace heat pressed into his soul instantly immolated the thought. Demons lied. It was their nature, their existence, as constant as gravity. They spoke despair, breathed madness. His purpose bloomed like an unsheathed sun within him. Banish, sever, protect the memory of ignorance at any cost. Without pause, without granting the poison time to seep, Feroz slammed the heavy base of his nemesis staff into the fractured geology beneath them. His unleashed will, focused through every arcane artificing of the ancient weapon, ignited a shockwave of psychic energy raw telekinetic detonation, rippling outwards like a star's pulse. The ground heaved violently, centuries-old cracks widening into chasms beneath the prince's unstable footing. For the first time, an artifact of genuine surprise flickered in its furnace eyes. It staggered back half a step, momentarily off-go. Feroz pressed the advantage instantly, a silver arrow launched, his brothers a perfectly harmonic follow-through to his strike. Spoken communication was unnecessary. Their minds resonated towards a single imperative axis: erase, destroy, purify, obliterate the manifested infamy. Your words are ash discarded on worthless winds, Feroz growled, his voice devoid of inflection but carrying the weight and shearing edge of a starship's prow crashing through asteroid fields. We are not your prey. We are your extinction event, hurling you back into the screaming nothingness you crawled from. The demon prince snarled, its entire body convulsing with a surge of anticipated violence. Its baleful eyes narrowed into molten slits. The air thickened with the ozone tang of terror as it focused immense willpower, drawing down torrents of pure infernal force from the roiling storms beyond reality's skin. Its form swelled unnaturally, reality warping painfully around its corruption-soaked reality anchor. The blighted clouds boiled with horrid colors as Nurgle's garden leached lumens from some dying galaxy. The sky seemed to darken immensely, absorbing unnatural light. Yet Feroz and the Grey Knights stood their ground against the storm of liquefied chaos. Their psychic wards ignited on their armor and staffs, welcoming beacons of silvery defiance cutting swathes through the sudden, ominous dimness, adamantium bulwarks against the encroaching, sucking tide of eternal night. Slay this shell. The prince spat warp dust caking its blistered tongue. Kill this carrion flesh, it changes nothing. My essence feeds in the depths, the soul is pledged, returned. A guttural mockery of laughter like tearing metal echoed during its next bellow. Foolish paladins, none of you can unravel this knot. You may sever the threads woven into this reality, but the heart pattern, the core resonance of a prince within the Immaterium, that belongs eternally to the powers reborn. And those gods never yield their chosen playthings. Never. Servos humming quietly beneath the cacophony, Feroz remained silent, utterly still within the raging tempest, calm beneath the creaking pressure of a screaming reality. Alerts flickered across his retinal display, tactical runes denoting pressure points on the prince's massive carapace. Brother positioning indicators nested quietly in the corner of his vision. No incoming voxjetter mudded the clarity, only pure, unyielding focus. The psychic resonance of the staff against his palm. The faint parachute-silk rustle of the librarian's mind, renewing the barrier holding back the lesser horde's furious howling tidal wave. the heavy thudding impacts of sanctified bolts embedding microfractures in impossible bone plating beneath the prince's skin. He existed for this moment, executing the immutable calculus of righteous execution, his sacred, silent, eternally thankless charge. He would end the manifested blasphemy here and now, scattering its tethered consciousness back into the royal. His mind, like a honed scalpel, dissected the threat before him, angles of attack, loci of greatest weakness, subtle shifts betraying the prince's next possible distortion-blurred offensive maneuver. The demon prince's eternal threats, its grand pronouncements about unassailable essence and the thraldom of unkillable souls pledged to thirsting chaos gods. They rolled over Fieros like stinking fog over unyielding obsidian cliffs, meaningless breath in the inexorable silence. His purpose existed beyond prediction and prophecy: to act, to destroy, to cleanse, to maintain the silence, to shoulder the burden of humanity's eternal ignorance once again. The words hit Fieros like rain against ancient stone, familiar, worn grooves eroded by repetition. Countless foes, countless boasts, each met with the same answer: death, a swift, decisive strike. His arm plunged forward, plunging the sanctified blade deep into the demon prince's vile heart. Corrupt flesh parted not with resistance, but a hideous giving way. The creature's howl ripped outwards, a sonic shriek that seemed to fray the edges of reality, vibrating the very air molecules into discord. Fieros didn't pause, didn't falter. He drove his weight behind the blade, forcing it deeper, up to the hilt, igniting a cataclysm within the demon's form. Psychic energy, pure and scalding white, erupted from the blade not as light but as a tsunami of purifying fire. It washed over the nightmare form, searing, dissolving. The demon prince's reality began to unravel, limbs smudging into smoke, torso collapsing into drifting ash, its roar choked off mid-screech, sucked back into the void from whence it came. For one choking heartbeat, the battlefield air hung thick, saturated with the cloying stench of ozone and charred, inhuman meat. Then cut through the lingering fog of dissolution, a final agonized shriek, impossibly high and sharp, tearing outwards before abruptly silenced. The demon prince was gone, not dead, never dead, merely banished, forced back screaming to its masters in the Imperium. But Fieros felt the hollow ache in his bones, the familiar weight settling on his shoulders. It was never the end. The demon prince had spoken its one true thing in its dying malice. Chaos, the abomination incarnate, could never be fully destroyed. It could only be driven back, a wound staunched, a tide held at bay, forever delayed. That was the marrow of their duty, the purpose forged into their souls, to fight an eternal war against an enemy that knew no final defeat. Silence, heavy and unnatural, descended upon the ruins. The Grey Knights stood amidst the pulverized landscape, their silver armor, etched with intricate yet defiantly stark wards, catching the weak, failing light of Vandra VII's dying day. They had won, for now. Yet even as the immediate pressure of the warp entity vanished, Fieros could feel it not threat, but inevitability, the heavy shadow of the Ordo Malleus approaching like thunderheads on the horizon. Agents in dark ships, minds wrapped in secrecy and necessity. They would come, as they always came, to wipe the minds of survivors, to overwrite the raw, bloody history unfolding across the planet with sanitized lies. In days, perhaps weeks, the citizens of Vandra VII would recall only a strange seismic disturbance, a night of unexplained fires or mass hysteria. The true horror, the invasion writhing claws and screaming blasphemies from beyond, the sacrifice that turned it back, would be fogged from their memories. Grey Knights themselves would blur into forgotten phantoms, night terrors dismissed upon waking. That was the way, that had to be the way. Justicar Fieros, gathering his force sword, still singing faintly with spent psychic resonance, felt the vox beat in his helm buzz, then crackle to life. A voice cold as interstellar void and sharp with authority filled his auditory implants, Inquisitor Tethra. Justicar Fieros, it stated, lacking warmth or inflection, mere stated fact. The demon is gone. Good. Now leave this place. The erasure protocols initiate immediately. Your involvement here dissolves. Fieros didn't acknowledge the command. There was nothing to say, nothing that needed saying. The machinery of the Inquisition had ground into motion, its verdict delivered. The Grey Knights would melt back into the perpetual night, the Emperor's secret wrath, his hunters stalking the Stygian margins of existence. Unseen, unknown, as they always had, as they always would. They moved off, spectral giants fading into the gloom, silent, leaving only ruin and unconscious relief behind. The people of Vandra VII would remember nothing of their real saviors, but their souls briefly would be cleansed of the taint. For a time, it was enough. It had to be. Before the Horus Heresy shattered reality, before treachery blossomed in the heart of the Emperor's greatest dream and rent the galaxy asunder like cheap canvas, the master of mankind, the architect of imperial truth, had foreseen. His vast intellect, spanning millennia, had glimpsed the seductive claws buried deep in the soul dark, the inherent vulnerability stitched even into his own masterworks. The Primarchs, his demigod sons, were pinnacles of genetic artistry, forged as engines of conquest and unity. Yet the Emperor, for all his brilliant fury, truly understood the insidious nature of chaos. It thrived on doubt, on hubris, on the fractures hidden within seemingly unbreakable minds. He saw the way tendrils of warpdent could exploit even divine flesh. Amidst the monolithic endeavors of the Great Crusade, the galaxy echoing with the din of compliance and the thrum of engines, the core concept simmered, the need for a specialized force. Not merely warriors, but something else. An anvil of immaculate purity against which the hammers of the Imperium would shatter. A weapon forever hidden, its fidelity untouched by the corrupting leech others called destiny. But the monumental task of unification consumed him. His focus lasered on outward conquest, and the vision remained constrained, a blueprint held tight within his own mind, its ultimate forging deferred. Then came the betrayal. Horus, Warmaster, Lupercal, the brightest star in the imperial firmament, the sun bathed most deeply in the Emperor's regard, fell. He didn't stumble, he plunged, willingly, exultantly, into the jaws of the dark gods. His rebellion ripped the galaxy open. It was a convulsive agony tearing at the fabric of the Imperium, a pain made manifest. Worlds burned loyal and traitor alike. Brothers bled brothers. Faith curdled, replaced by maddening whispers. Only after the brutal, meat-grinder hell of the Siege of Terra itself, after the cataclysm shook the Sol system to its core, after the Emperor in his terrible majesty stood finally face-to-face with his fallen son in the twisted guts of Horus's command ship, and shattered that corrupted soul utterly even as he himself was laid low, sundered and broken, then came the crushing, fuller comprehension. Chaos wasn't an externality, it was an infection gnawing from within. Ruinous powers had tasted imperial blood, rich beyond measure, the essence of demigods and legions. They circled now, voracious, eager. Reality shivered like a drumskin under unnatural fists. Demonic incursions ripped through weakened voids, not coincidental but predatory. The Emperor, his body all but extinguished, conscious only through the agonized mechanics of the Golden Throne, sustaining his spark by flaying the imperial webway and the souls of countless psychers, knew he could no longer rise. He could no longer shield humanity directly with blade or fire. In those final, bitter shards of lucidity before eternal internment, before the cybernetic dread overtook him fully, the Emperor summoned his most trusted servant, his regent, the being who alone bore the weight of his vision in the face of worldly ruin, Malcador the Sigillite. The throne room, resonant with dying energies, a nexus of pain and power, was their tomb-like sanctuary. Outside, Terra still smoked, echoing with the groans of victory bought at soul-crushing cost. Within, the Emperor, radiating agony yet biting focus, laid out the dire's truth. The heresy was but a bloody prologue. Chaos, its apotheosis deferred by Horus's destruction, remained coiled, patient, malignant. The traitor legions were beyond salvage, warped beyond knowing, tools honed for further atrocity. Their return was not a possibility, it was an impending doom. Fence against the next horror, the Emperor foresaw, demanded more than legions marshaled remotely. It demanded a weapon untouched, unsullied, forged in principles beyond the vulnerability he now saw mirrored in his own shattered genocide world. Your task, Malcador, the Emperor's voice emanates like tectonic pressure, compressed pain transmuted into command, is to create a force, a brotherhood of knights. They will hold the line against the darkness, my final gift and my last secret shield. The sentence hung immense. They must be incorruptible, immune to the sirens that seduced my sons. They will know no fear born of madness, no desire twisting into corruption. They will fight where no mortal eyes witness, their victories starkly unwitnessed but utterly vital. They will be humanity's bulwark against the encroaching night. Forgotten yet eternal. Malcador, the mountain of ancient secrets, bowed his head, yet stood impossibly tall under the weight. He understood with crystalline clarity. This wasn't just command, it was absolution and damnation intertwined. The Grey Knights, the Emperor's last hope, guardians cloaked in oblivion, a force whose existence would be a whispered rumor and whose fall would mean the end of all. Failure meant oblivion for the species he had labored millennia to forge. Malcador, wielding power and influence woven through the nascent foundations of the Imperium like adamantium cables, began his monstrously sacred task. His was the shadow to the Emperor's light, less a conqueror of star fields, more a sculptor of power structures and obliterator of inconvenient truths. His own origins were lost to pregalactic murk, but his authority was stone-cold unshakable, First Lord of the Imperium, architect of the Council of Terra, weaver of the sprawling imperial bureaucracy. He was the Shadowkeeper, the whisper in the Emperor's ear, a psyker whose power flowed not in pyrotechnics but in subtlety and chilling, absolute understanding of warp and woe. Information was his arsenal. He knew secrets that could immolate Primarchs. More than political weight, he possessed an understanding of chaos surpassed perhaps only by the Emperor himself, not merely its power, but its deep, psychological rot, the insidious ways it seeped into thought and spirit. Where the Emperor's solutions blazed, Malcador's operated in the crepuscular realm of necessity. He gathered himself, his foremost imperative: select the foundation stones of this impossible brotherhood. Mere strength, stratagems, or psychic potential were insufficient. The shredded cosmos of the heresy screamed one lesson: power without flawlessly anchored purity was a demon's weapon waiting to be turned. The selection must be a crucible. He needed not warriors who could resist, but those who already had. Individuals whose souls had been thrust into the crucible of the enemy's domain and emerged holding their sanity and loyalty untarnished. He became a silent reaper traversing the battlefield ruins of the Imperium's soul. He sought warriors who had slogged through the acidic rain of chemos, stood shield wall on Istvan's death plains, hauled themselves wounded but unbowed from the charnel yards of Beta Garment. Veterans drawn from the shattered shards of loyalist legions, survivors whose oaths hadn't bent under the soul-sickening horrors unveiled. Luna wolves steel who spat in Horus's face as their legion plunged into heresy, imperial fists enduring walls broken and cyclone-juiced terrors, white scars whose lightning raids outran infernal whispers, blood angels holding back the twin specters of rage and despair beside their Primarch. He looked beyond the legions, to the silent, golden titans, the Adeptus Custodes, paragons, not merely space marines but alpha-plus beings tailored solely to shield him and Terra. Their unshakable purpose, genetic refinement beyond legion boundaries, and esoteric knowledge were critical additions. Some made the ultimate silent transition to this new Shadowborn duty. Then came the trials. Physical prowess was proven. Now the purity of soul must be fire-tempered beyond impossibility. Malcador subjected his chosen to ordeals that blurred sanity itself. They were thrust not guided, thrust into the raw, screaming depths of the warp. Not a brief transit, but a prolonged immersion in purest discord. Reality peeled back like necrotic flesh around them. Unchained demonic legions manifested, taunting, slavering, their forms anatomical nightmares breathed into existence by sentient despair and rage. They faced Keeper of Secrets twisting logic to lustful agony, bloodthirsters raining viscerathought, lords of change unmaking known physics with whispers. The recruits had to stand, retain combat focus, deflect psychic torments promising ascendant godhood if only they bent knee, promising release from pain, fulfillment of deepest desires, escape from the crushing duty heaped upon them. They were made to watch and feel the disintegration of weaker aspirants, souls shredded into psychic shrieks that echoed forever in the stripped bare Imperium. Only those whose psychic shields were adamant, whose loyalty to the Emperor burned with a core of Starfire-refusing eclipse, whose minds repelled whisper scratches and roars of damnation like flawless, mirrored steel, survived. Only they emerged blinking from warptrial vomited back into reality, souls scoured clean by annihilation. Only they would compose the first sacrosanct tithe of Grey Knights, the first few of 777 blades forged explicitly to cut into the eternal night. Their physical and mental purity was consecrated scripture. Malcador's final decree, operating on the impeccable yet terrifying logic forged from witnessing the Primarch's horrifying vulnerability, sealed their genetic uniqueness. Their genocide would originate not from the line of any Primarch, however loyal, however magnificent. The original sin of potential chaos corruption traced back to the demigod's very conception, woven into their divine being. That flaw could not be risked. That manipulated lineage could not be the foundation of this ultimate defense. Their genetic core, the blueprint of their transhuman perfection, would be drawn purely, sacrosanctly, from a source untouched by that vulnerability, a progenitor beyond reproach, beyond doubt, a lineage unsullied. Its origin became the deepest secret within the secret, known only to Malcador, and the terrifying silence of his intent before he finally spent his life itself to entomb Horus's soul-shattered remnants within the Golden Throne's torment machine, leaving his orders echoing forever through the fabric of ages. The Grey Knights became that echo made manifest, the single, secret flaw in the ruinous power's design. A weapon conceived in the aftershocks of betrayal, forged in the fires of psychic damnation, and shielded from knowledge itself. An eternal bulwark standing vigil in the silent places, their only testament the millions of souls unknowingly saved from eternal torment, carried forever in their heavily armored, utterly silent hearts. They emerged from the very nadir of the Imperium's despair, not symbols of hope, but grim monuments to the price paid for survival in the face of inescapable shadow. Enough. It forever had to be. From the unchained depths of the Emperor's own divine essence, drawn pure and unsullied, flowed the sacred seed that birthed the Grey Knights. This wasn't the echoed lineage of Primarchs, flawed vessels sculpted from a dimmer mold, but the luminous core itself, the Emperor's very genetic code, untouched, incorruptible, a radiant skein against which the blighted tides of the warp could only crash and recede. This genetic purity, radiant beyond measure, formed the bedrock upon which their legendary resilience was forged, an unbreakable will fused into bone and sinew against the unspeakable allure of chaos. Such a genesis wasn't mere assembly, wasn't like the forging of other Astartes chapters wrought in the vast forges of Mars. It was sacred alchemy, a painstaking ritual demanding the most arcane whispers of genetic manipulation, interwoven with psychic resonances drawn from ancient, almost lost arts, a symphony of power channeled through the Imperium's final masters of such desperate crafts. Each Grey Knight ascended from this crucible wasn't merely chosen, he was a masterpiece, an apogee. His flesh and organs resonated with enhancements exceeding even the formidable blessings bestowed upon the greatest heroes of other chapters. His psychic potential was honed and amplified to a fever pitch, his very soul ensconced within ethereal wards of blinding potency, patterns copied from the Emperor's own everlasting lumen shield. This connection wasn't legend or metaphor, it was the pulsing heart of their being, meaning that radiant within the core of every Grey Knight warrior beat a shard of his celestial flame, an echo of that divine will which had once sculpted stars and commanded empires. This fragment of pure, agonizing light was their truest weapon against the horrors cavorting in the Empyrean, for no gibbering horror birthed from nightmare could withstand its annihilating purity, could face the Emperor's essence made manifest in flesh. It was this incandescent purity, this absolute severance from the touch of darkness, that defined their singularity. They weren't merely resistant to chaos, standing strong against its insidious whispers. They were utterly immune, fortresses forged from holy fire where corruption simply withered and died. Not one Grey Knight, ever, across the echoing vaults of 10 millennia, had yielded to the ruinous powers, nor would one ever, a testament written in unshakable conviction across the face of desolation. Malcador the Sigillite, ancient hand of his fading master, knew that these sacred vessels could not exist within the mundane clamor of the recovering Imperium. The final command echoed from the Golden Throne itself. The Grey Knights, this ultimate safeguard, must remain veiled, secreted away from the wider Imperium's struggling billions and its fractured lords. Thus Malcador, eyes piercing the skein of possibilities, chose Titan, cool and distant jewel-orbiting majestic Saturn, a place of solitude of perfect removal. Titan, like the knights it would harbor, needed shroud itself beyond perception. In the dying gasps of the galactic conflagration known as the Horus Heresy, as Terra itself shook with the tread of traitors, Malcador had enacted his desperate stratagem. He plunged Titan into the tempestuous currents of the immaterium, sealed away like a weapon clutched in a clenched fist, hidden from the devastation that tore the skin from the galaxy. Locked within that unreal realm, unbound by trivial linear chronology, time stretched and flowed like molten silver. Generations of Grey Knights endured within the moon's shielded core, training in eternal twilight, their numbers unseen, gathering recruits whose souls burned with the sacred psychic potential, identified Malcador's far-flung agents, even while the shattered Imperium outside clawed its way back from the abyss, unaware of the force gestating within the warp's chaotic womb. When Titan finally roared back into the cold light of real space, adrift in Saturn's celestial procession once more, what emerged wasn't an untested formation, but a chapter fully realized, gleaming and grim. Their fortress monastery gripped Titan's heart, transformed now into an unassailable bastion, a vault of forbidden lore, arcane weaponry pulsing with contained energies, ancient tomes whispering secrets that could unravel minds, holy relics holding back the dark. Purpose filled immediately the hollows of that silent bastion. Their founding coalesced, the mantle of the Emperor's most terrible and vital war settled onto their ceramite shoulders. Bound by decree and sacred oath to the Ordo Malleus, that most dread hammer within the Inquisition's arsenal, forged specifically for the abyssal hunt, the Grey Knights ignited their singular crusade, the utter annihilation of the daemonic, particle by screaming particle, across the infinite curve of the galaxy. They became whispers in the void, phantoms clad in silver and runes, their existence itself a classified void, known only to the various zenith of the Inquisition's shadowed conclaves. Fewer still, a mere whisper within a whisper, comprehended the terrifying magnitude of their purpose, the burden they carried for every living soul unknowingly breathing beneath the refuge of their endless vigilance. For 10,000 circling years, since Malcador knelt and accepted his own dread fate, the Grey Knights have waged their purgatorial war in perfect, crushing silence. Not a single hymn rings out in celebration of their planet-saving victories. Not a single monument lifts its head towards a polluted sky for their martyrs, whose shattered remains litter uncountable unnamed battlefields lost to warp storms. Their sacrifices, acts of unthinkable heroism and desperate last stands, fade unmarked into the tempest of time. Yet without the silent tread of their hallowed steps, the unflinching purpose etched onto their souls by the Emperor's will, the Imperium, that vast, groaning carcass of humanity's hope, would have long since been ripped apart, its heart devoured by the insidious, ever-gnawing fangs of chaos. They stand as the midnight wall, the Emperor's final, utterly deniable weapon, held ready against the absolute darkness that forever strains to consume every flickering star. Malcador's last and mightiest labor, forged in the dying embers of heresy, bore fruit he could never witness ripening fully. Yet his legacy endures forever encased in the unbreakable purity of the Grey Knights, warriors sculpted from divine immateriality. They are the living vessel of the Emperor's indomitable will made manifest, weapons honed to transcendent perfection, standing unwavering, eternally vigilant against the greatest, most consuming evil the spiral arms had ever spawned. Consider the vast screaming theater of the 41st millennium, a panoply ceaselessly ripped by war on scales that warp human comprehension, entire worlds sacrificed like kindling to idols of conflict, flaming stars sent flickering into eternal night. Yet layered impossibly beneath this cacophony of annihilation, woven into the very fabric of dread reality, exists another war entirely invisible. It claims no continents, seeks no resource, covets no glory stained with blood and tears. Its battlefield is the territory of the soul, the contested ground of human essence itself, and it is fought not openly, not beneath the banners of legions, but coiled within shadows so deep the Imperium's daylight rarely, if ever, penetrates. It is the war fought solely by the Grey Knights, that brotherhood of anointed hunters, their existence itself a carefully guarded shard of classified doom. This phantom conflict, this desperate holding action against oblivion, unfolds in a vacuum of awareness. It is veiled from the grinding masses, whose collective ignorance shields them from madness, concealed from the colossal, thunderous military machine, laboring to maintain crumbling borders, hidden even from lords perched atop gilded spires who command entire fleets, yet must be safeguarded from a truth far too lethal. It is the war fought in places where sanity curdles, the galaxy's cancerous corners blighted by whispers older than ancient suns, where even the solemn light emanating from the golden throne strains thinly to penetrate. This war, this eternal benediction of violence conducted in utter silence, bears no resemblance to the crusades waged by the illustrious sons of Guilliman or Sanguinius. While Ultramarines fortify bulwarks against monstrous hordes of Xenos, while Imperial fists hold mountain passes against tidal waves of unreconstructed rebellion, the Grey Knights trespass into a different order of nightmare. Their enemy is Legion, yes, but it floods not from dying stars crawling with alien intent. Their foe bleeds from the gaping wounds in the cosmos itself, creatures of pure malignant concept, the demonic denizens birthed within and sustained by the sentient maelstrom called the Warp, sworn slaves to the shattering howl of the Chaos Gods. These entities dissolve meaning. They thrive where natural law buckles and whimpers, unreal shapes congealed from the Warp's infinite, entropic malice. To confront such madness demands power beyond muscle and steel. It demands the searing lance of the mind, unshakable psychic potential, focused to annihilating purity. It demands a spiritual fortress immune to rot. It demands, above all, that perfect, uncorruptible purity that is the dread and glory emblem of the Grey Knights alone. The silent war, however, transcends the mere exorcism of physical nightmare. It wages a parallel, equally vicious battle against the insidious poison of knowledge itself. The terrifying, gnawing revelation that demons exist not as fevered theological metaphor, but as entities clawing tangible holes in reality, could shatter the fragile lattice of faith upholding the entire, crumbling Imperium. The Grey Knights intrinsically understand this monstrous paradox. To truly shield agonized humanity from dissolution, they must eradicate not merely the entities themselves, but meticulously, ruthlessly expunge every trace, every lingering echo, every horrified memory of the demonic incursion they purge. If the common masses, huddled in their billions on dismal hiveworlds or toiling beneath irradiated skies, were to glimpse the blasphemous magnitude of this lurking threat, the resulting psychic spasm of panic, hopelessness, and shattered faith could drown the Emperor's light faster than any traitor legion. The Imperium would collapse inward upon pillars made of screams. For this most terrible of imperatives, the Grey Knights embrace their exile into the shadows, perfect auditors of disappearance. No evidence illuminates the aftermath of their battles. They do not fight alongside the grim legions of the Astra Militarum, those brave souls unaware their salvation came clad in silver and biting force weapons, nor align with their fellow Astartes brethren unless the contamination is so virulent that unified extinction hangs in the darkness. And even then, reeking of righteous slaughter, they enforce the grim edict: no witnesses. Survivors, guardsmen scarred body and spirit, hysterical civilians clutching the tatters of their sanity. Even the mighty Ars brethren, whose gen-enhanced minds withstand horrors that melt mortal men, cannot be allowed to retain the knowledge etched in terror. The Ordo Malleus, that shrouded hammer moving inexorably behind the Grey Knights, deploys its soul-scouring psychers, scourging memories until only a terrifying, nameless void remains where nightmare once reigned undisturbed. This the Grey Knights accept as the unflinching baptism of their duty. It is the prime commandment of the Silent War, a conflict waged not solely against encroaching chaos, but a relentless campaign scorching away the memory of its passing, leaving behind only blessed, terrifying ignorance. Forged strictly for this unimaginable obligation, they stand as the Emperor's hidden blade, potent specifically because of their inherent purity. Where other chapters, bastions fortifying humanity for millennia, have occasionally heard the whisper and succumbed, bending knee unto shattered gods, not one Grey Knight has ever tasted the bitter dregs of chaos corruption. Not one will, ever. Psychic wards etched with blinding brilliance directly onto the matrix of their souls upon induction, together with their unyielding, utterly consumptive devotion to the slumbering master of mankind, form the ultimate barricade against the warp's siren song. This holy immunity constructs them as the galaxy's ultimate weapon against the Neverborn. But the cost of this transcendent purity is a profound severance. The Grey Knights are condemned to isolation from the very humanity they bleed silently to protect, shackled by chains of secrecy thicker and colder than adamantium, preventing them forever from sharing in the life of the Imperium they preserve via methods none dare comprehend. They dwell suspended, their existence bound to the warp-sealed fastness on Titan, that cold lunar prison hidden by artifice and sorcery from the prying instruments of the wider galaxy. Only the Ordo Malleus, itself within the cloister of the holy orders of the Emperor's Inquisition, holds keys to understand, however partially, the full compass of the Grey Knights' remit. Even within that feared cabal, knowledge of their precise actions, counted deployments, the locations touched by their purifying flames, remains fragmented, buried deep. The Silent War commands the Grey Knights remain phantoms, as insubstantial as myth, for their revealed presence would inevitably ignite dangerous queries, questions the flailing Imperium, strung together with desperation and faith, possesses no fortitude to ever answer. This hidden crusade unfolds not amid the grinding wars of attrition scarring known space, but in sudden, devastating thrusts of surgical precision, termination protocols enacted faster than alarm klaxons can howl, localized, overwhelming purification enacted before the target world's populace even registers an unnatural tightening of the air before reality shreds. When the cancerous seed of a demonic infestation erupts unnoticed upon a world, the Grey Knights materialize promptly. Often executed beneath cover of storms, or in the lightless canyons of rotting hive cities, witnessed only by void-blackened gargoyles. Their battlegrounds are the deep fungal levels choking behind forgotten industry, lightless zones where ancient nightmares breed, treacherous asteroid fields whispering with heresy long buried, star systems surrendered to entropy millennia past, roads forgotten by stellar cartography choked with hungry ghosts, the very roiling face of the warp itself, where impossible geometries twist sanity, making their weaponized souls the only anchor holding back dissolution. The battles intrinsic to this war are precipitant and annihilating. The Grey Knights have no patience for the grinding attrition of sieges, the consumption of decades forging campaigns. They strike with the suddenness of tectonic upheaval, applying their terrifying might like psychic scalpels, ruthlessly excising the malignancy before its roots can complexify and spread its toxic rot further. Sometimes this necessitates the absolute decomposition of entire cults festering unseen, meticulously erasing every adherent, ensuring no spore of corruption escapes into the wider stream of human consciousness. In other, more gravid moments, they breach already warping reality, performing visceral exorcisms upon demons manifesting palpable claws and gnashing maws terrorizing strained atmospheres. Employing their focused psychic fury, honed over centuries of such vile encounters, their ancient nemesis weapons radiant with contained power, they rip the entity's limb from phantasmal limb, banishing the shrieking nightmares back into the comprehending void they crawled from. The Grey Knights, however, do not bear the shocking weight of the Silent War utterly unsupported. Their perpetually shadowed allies remain the grim inquisitors of that specialist arm Ordo Malleus, agents consecrated specifically for the dark art of demon purges. These lords of purgation possess authority vast beyond mortal comprehension, empowered to condemn entire stellar regions, summon planet-cleansing flame, execute planetary governors, or revered chapter masters with a single, unarguable signature scrawled amidst intricate seals. Yet possessing such cosmic might brings chilling perspective. Despite their immense temporal power, these select inquisitors comprehended the Grey Knights remain uniquely elevated, something adjacent to holy artillery, sanctified weapons, whose doctrine operated beyond even the Emperor's own Ordo's control mechanisms. Inquisitorial operatives often operate pinpointing the burgeoning tumors of warp incursion, utilizing ageless networks of spies entrapped by fear or duty across the galaxy, passing coordinates and potential vectors along encrypted relays directly directing Grey Knight forces towards required sites of purification, long before local authorities note disturbing absences or inexplicable atrocities. These same Inquisitors shoulder the vital gutture of evidence eradication after the engine of destruction has passed. Once the blinding silver blades cease and psychic echoes fade from the sullied ground, the shield servants of the Ordo Malleus move deliberately into the devastation to oversee final pan-searing. Specialist teams cleanse lingering taint employing ritual technologies, burning corrupted matter unto molecular vapor. More crucially, the grim calculus regarding witnesses demands execution. Survivors, be they Astra Militarum troops, Hallowed civilians sheltering amidst rubble, or even battle brothers from other Guardians chapters who stood against the abominations, face unsettling absolute conclusion. Subliminal psychic scrubbing rewriting memories into harmless oblivion, or the sudden terminal silence of execution, obliteration ensuring no fugitive narrative escapes to spread existential dread. This intricate partnership between the Grey Knights architects of Purge and their Ordo Malleus handlers constitutes the very circulatory system sustaining existence for the Silent War. The Grey Knights possess zero patience nor aptitude for managing imperial bureaucracy, planetary politics, or the Baroque facades upholding governance. Their vision holds the singular sacred objective: deletion of the demonic vector wherever found. The Ordo Malleus, intrinsically political, dedicated fundamentally to obfuscated preservation of imperial hierarchy and the veil of ignorance shielding fragile human faith, maneuvers within those vast structures. Thus the mechanisms synchronize, the unreadable weapon delivering absolute finality, the clandestine intelligence and obscuration agency concealing its very passage, functioning perfectly, implacably together to protect the crumbling Imperium from the harrowing comprehension that would annihilate every foundation from within. Yet the secrecy enveloping them like a shroud bears heavy cost every moment endured. The Silent War inflicts soul-deep wounds accumulating across protracted millennia. For the Grey Knights' blinkered existence, knowing they shall transcend eternally forgotten, unsung however galaxicized the salvation delivered, resonates constantly as a grim reminder of isolation absolute. They do not fight demanding laurels like the Herald's chapters basking in heroic saga recounts. They do not forge legends enhancing primarchal legacy replays for future brothers. They earn absolutely no admiration echoing from the billions saved unknowingly. The Grey Knights engage solely, totally, fanatically dedicated to the service of their dormant God Emperor, destined grimly toward internalizing this absolute reality. Their sole, profound reward lies confined within acceptance of perpetual anonymity. This crushing psychological expenditure accumulates inevitably. Each inductee undergoes catechism emphasizing suppression of individual identity, subsuming everything into accepting, embracing, becoming the Emperor's spectral fist, the invisible hand guiding extermination, knives unseen. However, no conditioning reaches untouched into the deepest wellspring of unspoken despair. Even the disciplined fortress of a genetically fortified Astartes consciousness must occasionally struggle beneath the immense mountain awareness imposes. Detachment utter and complete. The burden of deliberately eliminating loyal, Imperial's comrades in humanity, convicted believers purely, to enforce silence binding knowledge more dangerous than any warp-spawn plague. For the Grey Knight structure, no ceremonial parades snake through grateful worlds, experiencing no orchestrate ceremonies listing innumerable victories. Their sacrifices contribute no verses sagas consumed in solemn halls resonant prideful nostalgia. They leave no trace, threading unnamed paths ever forwards, leaving only terminus and breathless nightmare silence smothering territories retaken from horrors unimaginable. Yet this staggering ontological burden doesn't solely oppress the Grey Knights themselves. The Inquisitors' existing burial ground within Ordo Malleus tread its self-same heavy pathways. Trained detached necessity, they possess no celestial purity shield insulating against psychic toll exacted. They command impossible decisions, each weighing soul cost, condemning entire planetary populations uninvolved directly, yet tainted locations rendered uninhabitable existentially contaminated, ordering termination legions loyal guardsmen heroic beyond measure, imposing brutal sanction upon honored allied arts chapters, witnessing accidental forbidden truths, manipulating vast galactic scale concealments, requiring deception upon deception collapsing upon genocidal scales. They bear weight no conscience, truly forged endure unflawed across century upon century, enacting such policy. What decision possible deciding billions, disregarded objectively upon scale, possibly balanced against galactic doom. Malcador understood sacrifice when plunging Titan warp-bound. The Grey Knights understood it every time martyrdom accepts ignorance. The Inquisitors understand sacrifice carving their desiccated hearts organ recoverable, whilst charting courses requiring sacrifice, beyond apocalypse, continuing suffering positive silence, securing stability, trembling avoidance, extinction beyond remission, understanding costs beyond calculation, achieving those precious shadows, enduring, gulfing, ruthless, enlightened consensus, preserving hope, unimaginable generations, eternities, couched beneath unknowable salvations. The weight of their knowledge settles like lead in their bones, a suffocating gravity known only to the inquisitors of the Ordo Malleus. They walk the gilded halls of imperial power, stand upon worlds teeming with oblivious billions, yet dwell within a prison of silence forged by necessity. They carry within them the true, horrific scale of the warp's malignancy, the crawling dread most minds mercifully cannot comprehend. Fighting alongside the Emperor's most secret legion, silencing those tainted witnesses, ensuring the demonic infestation bleeds no further than the charnel grounds of forsaken stations or lost world's thighs is their grim duty. But their heaviest burden is not the smiting of fiends, it is the solitary guardianship of mankind's blissful ignorance. They cannot unburden their souls to peers in the Ordos, cannot confide in allies whose certitude in orderly reality is their shield. To speak the truth of the Grey Knights, to whisper of the crawling chasms beneath the veneer of imperial enlightenment, risks shattering that shield beyond repair. Thus they dwell in perpetual twilight, masters of secrets and wary shadows where the cordial smile of a fellow inquisitor might mask heresy or undue curiosity. Trust is an indulgence they dare not afford. Betrayal coils like a venomous serpent beneath every seemingly genuine word. Their vigil is a profoundly lonely war, fought not only against tangible demons, but against the profound isolation ensuring those demons remain unseen phantoms. In this agonizing solitude, these warriors of the Malleus become reflections of their silent partners, as fundamentally, devastatingly isolated as the Grey Knights they serve, forever guarding the light by embracing the dark. And though this silent war rages in the hidden corners of existence, its silent shockwaves hold up the very pillars of the crumbling Imperium. Think of it as the bedrock straining beneath an ornate, decaying city, invisible yet essential. Without these hidden guardians, the Ordo Malleus tirelessly purging knowledge as much as entities, without the Grey Knights emerging only at the abyss's edge to scour the filth from reality, the burgeoning chaos would blossom unchecked. Demonic incursions would metastasize, consuming sectors in waves of impossible horror. The soul-wrenching, sanity-vaporizing truths of the warp would flood into the collective consciousness, extinguishing the last guttering flames of morale and order in a maelstrom of despair and raving chaos. The Imperium, shattered by unbearable knowing, would crumble like sun-baked clay. So let their banners be moth-eaten cloth, and their names be sand-scoured from history. The silent war raging deep below the thunder of visible conflicts is the vital rhythm that keeps the straining heart of humanity beating. It is the grim covenant that permits billions to live, love, and toil in blessed ignorance, unaware of the cyclopean horrors yearning beyond the stars of reality. The Grey Knights fight eternally aware of that fearful necessity. Their victories are unmarked graves, their triumphs unmarked voidseat they stand, locked in their sanctified purpose. They fight because human souls, however benighted by ignorance, must be guarded. The silent war is eternal, a beat measured not in discrete victories, but in the enduring defiance against dissolution. As long as chaos pulses like a diseased heart in the immaterium, as long as demonic tendrils probe the skin of the universe seeking purchase, the Grey Knights materialize from shadow, wreathed in psychic flame and unspoken oaths, waging their war without cease. Foundation stones unseen, they are the Emperor's ultimate bequeathal to mankind, his final bulwark, silent protectors, the absolute shield held firm against the infinite, gibbering darkness of the Empyrean. Indeed, in this galaxy convulsed by endless strife and poisoned promises, where loyalty curdles and despair is an insidious contagion, the very notion of incorruptibility seems a myth whispered by the devout. The Imperium, decaying colossus that it spans the stars, festers with betrayal at every level. Even the Emperor's chosen legions, his angels incarnadine, have proven heartbreakingly fallible to the velvet corruption that seeps from the warp. Legions once radiant with purpose have danced bloodily into damnation, rending their oaths for power that promised ascent only to deliver eternal damnation. Yet amidst the groaning weight of this betrayal, forged in the very shattering of idealism during the heresy's bitter birthing pangs, one solitary brotherhood crystallized under the sign of the Sigma, radiating a purity like white iron drawn from the cosmic core. They are the Grey Knights, and their martial skill, their peerless defiance against the Neverborn, their lifeblood shed in the Emperor's name, the very incorruptibility that defines their nightmare existential find their anchor, their unyielding source, in a singular sacred covenant that binds their souls, the unbreakable oath. They transcend mere warriors. They are psalms made manifest, terracotta soldiers baked in the kilns of absolute divinity. They live the Emperor's will, sculpted in clandestine genesis upon Titan's ice-shrouded rock, tempered beyond steel by disciplines that warped the very soul, and pledged body, mind, and spirit to a cause so vast it swallows individuality whole. This oath, breathed in the sanctum silence during the fateful initiation ritual, forms the bedrock of their identity. An iron vow, a living chain wrought of faith and unspeakable psychic resonance, fusing purpose and duty into one, forging a wall around their souls so absolute that no whisper of chaos, however honeyed, however terrifying, can ever seep through. To know the Grey Knights is to feel the crushing gravity of this oath, a weight simultaneously unbearable, yet their only salvation, an absolutely non-negotiable covenant carved in blood and luminosity, sworn unto the Emperor and his embattled Imperium, that no Knight of Grey will ever be lost to chaos, not now, not in 10,000 years, not ever. This sacred burden was conceived amidst the embers of a dying dream, during the Horus Herse's Titanomachy, when the nascent Imperium teetered on the screaming brink. As the Emperor lay sundered upon the ancient mechanisms of the Golden Throne, his vision fractured by the betrayal of Horus, the desperate imperative for warriors beyond the flawed paradigms of the legions became terrifyingly clear. The legions, elemental forces in gleaming ceramite, had shattered. Many danced shrieking in the ruinous power's light. The loyalty of the survivors blistered under trials no human soul was meant to endure. It fell to Malcador the Sigillite, the shrouded, ancient architect who held the Emperor's final trust, the unspoken Imperator Tremendum, to forge a hammer from sacred despair. Malcador understood the impossible demand. To assault the cancers festering within the warp demanded soldiers not just stronger than Astartes, but soldiers untouchable. Incorruptible, immune to promises that had seduced demigods of caliber. Yet how? The beast demanded the impossible. The answer was a covenant forged of sulfur, the unbreakable oath. It was designed as more than mere pledge. It became an implant of the psyche and spirit, a vorpal lock, sealed into the vital core of each Grey Knight by the dying psychic furnace strain emanating from the distant throne room. Those bound by it were shackled for eternity, their very souls armored by the relentless, glowing chains of their uttered vow, forever shielded against the cancer of the Empyrean like clean steel polished beyond contamination. The oath is no simple declaration. It is a luminescent crucible forged in psychic fire within Titan's deepest sanctuaries. Each initiate grapples with rites transcending agony, trials scorching both sinew and soul. Only then, the culminating sacrament, the pledging. Kneeling before the hierophantic gaze of the chapter master and the titanic psychic presences of the Grand Masters, the landscape suffused not with heat, but a silent, crushing luminescence. The initiate grips the sleeping power within his nemesis force weapon. He does not voice the oath in the tongues of men. It bleeds from him psychically resonant frequencies cascading among his gathered brethren, a binding skein intangible and inescapable. This mental litany, reverberating through the shared psychic substance of their being, stitches the fresh soul irrevocably to the chapter's tortured heart. Its structure is a triune prison sanctuary. One is proskinius to the Emperor, absolute, unhesitating, consuming. A fealty not merely to a ruler, but to a suffering godlight fixing their purpose. Neither the labyrinthine politics of the High Lords, nor the weeping ruins of Terra itself, hold his final gaze. Only the throne light guides the blade against the unclean. Doubt is surgically excised from potential at birth mines layered with psychic wards, rendering invasion untenable. 2 is Kenertha, soul purity as an active state. Wars fought as much in the echoing halls of their own fortitude as on battlefields soaked in gore. Where genelines greater than mountain ranges have fallen to whispers, the Grey Knight maintains gleaming, inhuman fortitude. Constant discipline, psychic ablutions like icy water on nerve endings, minds hardened to diamond against temptation, armor incised with fractal defenses beyond mere geometry, their very lificence saturated by the throne's refusing radiance. All oathed, impregnable. 3 is the hunt, the embrace of exhaustion without cessation. Continuance is the great cruelty. There is no applause, no respite, no vindication waiting beyond countless massacres. They perceive the war of shattered realities as perpetual grinding bedrock beneath the skin of reality. The Grey Knight understands he is not a sentinel awaiting dawn, but the sealing needle staving off inevitable collapse until death grinds him into the history dust. He offers peace, reputation, comfort, all immolated at the altar of invisible preservation. A weapon's existence gratefully consumed. Humanity will never blink upwards and bless their unnamed sacrifice. This profound psychic atrocity protects, yes, but its true terror and strength is less the recited truth sounds than the fate woven during the ritual. As the binding words resonate psychically, they forge chains of blinding energy directly to the suffocating beacon of the Emperor's distant agony. Intact Knight's Koratakor with the throne. This isn't phantom sympathy, it's crucifixion caulked by devotion. The Grand Masters become blacksmiths hammering that oath chain directly into the initiate's essence. This manifests not merely as memory, but crucially as impenetrable armor against the caress and corruption of the warp. Combined with ritual-engraved sigils burning behind closed eyelids and etched impossibly onto ceramite, it births an adamantine vortex around the soul. Slavering hunger cannot penetrate it, painful glory cannot seduce it. Yet more terrifyingly, this bond functions also as kinetic transformer, a cold conduit, converting pure faithfulness directly into ruinous annihilation upon reality-defying horrors. Feel the rolling thunder as Grey Knights channel snatches of the throne's infinite resonance through Nemesis weaponry beams tearing demons apart with the Emperor's own vengeful need. It is pure original hate persona manifestation. So intrinsically fused are they to this sword promise that any deviation doesn't merely besmirch it activates the oath's metastasized karmic reflex. To question, to even blink inward as sorrow scratches, is forbidden. This immaterial cage built into their essence doesn't offer penitence. If the unimaginable erosions of endless war causes one singular crack within, if paralyzing doubt creeps like mold onto resolve, the oath will purge through eradication. White flame surges instantaneously from that unending torchlight abyss they're anchored to. A mercy kill, annihilation of consciousness before corruption even wet tongue touches lobe tissue. Painless, perhaps, essential, utterly, for if betrayal beckons, the vessel ceases to exist in time measured finer than eyes perceive betrayal possible. Only ash marks their failure. This slaughter holds the Grey Knights in rhythmic beat, ancient grey heads, and novitiate in patterning. Paranoia, that eternal imprisoner, guides their mutual watch like god-goaded hawks circling perceived weakness. Any tremor mentally uncovered warrants probing clawgrasp by fellow initiates, ritualized psychic violation demanding disclosure. Should they sense tanglemeat perception beyond permissible levels, immediate bullet communion. The flesh liquefies phlogiston bright, the soul released only after purification by scorchlight. Even death grants no commemoration. Falling victories appear as smudged ritual within fortress archives. Thus the heft settles. The oath is infinitum catastrophe. Instantly the candidate knows the cost. He relinquishes peace utterly. Seclusion provides his halting rest. Recognition among mortals becomes a scrap your brothers burn. Hope crystals twist to dust before produced. They plunder every ordinary mortal pleasure at unheard intensity. War demands endless vigils until sinew liquefies. Images paint themselves grotesquely, comrades screaming into void gaps as void claws penetrate unfathomed defenses, lifetime percentages spent mind-cleansed after horrors witnessed, the echoing silence for millennia that confirms no rescue beam shows for them either. How frequent is this inner burning? How does it shape fatigued cognition? Do they exist as beings or function as broken oath fragments trembling beneath weights unimaginable? Constant proximity to monstrous corruption extracts grave penalties. Some detachment. Psychological reality crumbles. Memory becomes a trauma directory whispered to darkness. The unbreakable oath protects against tangible corruption. Yes, forging incorruptibility beyond contest. Yet it exacts a toll grimmer than martyrdom, a crucifixion fought unseen on fields of shadow, an eternal bearing witness to terrors sealed away into merciful oblivion by the vast ignorance they perpetuity endure for others. They fight on when truly defeated, powered solely by the unbreakable oath. Their brittle vessel, sustained in that crushing void solely by faith in the Emperor and unshakable commitment to the Imperium. For the Grey Knights, this sacred vow is both an ironclad anchor against the warp's tempest and a crushing yoke, an omnipresent weight screaming their eternal duty. It's a promise etched into soulbound bone, unbreakable, undeniable, to be upheld at any cost, the unassailable bedrock upon which the entire chapter stands. Without it, they would splinter and fall prey to the whispers that shattered countless others. With it, they are rendered invincible. For 10,000 brutal years, the unbreakable oath has defined them, allowing them to wage their eternal secret war against the howling madness of the demonic, to remain the Emperor's final, impenetrable bulwark against the depravity boiling from the warp. This oath guarantees that no Grey Knight will ever kneel before chaos. It chains them utterly to their sacred mandate, protecting frail humanity from the all-consuming darkness beyond the veil. As long as there are Grey Knights, as long as the oath burns unsullied within their hearts, the Imperium clings yet to fragile hope. Their war may rage unseen in shadowed places, their countless sacrifices forever unacknowledged by trillions, yet their indispensable role in the Imperium's nightmare longevity is absolute. They are without doubt the Emperor's final, desperate hope, the unbreakable shield grimly enduring between doomed humanity and the gibbering legions of chaos. They will fight on until their last, shuddering breath dissolves into the void, eternally bound by the oath that can never be broken.